We're finally going to be talking about knives. In this video, we're going to discuss what you're going to get for your average home cook, as well as what knives you should get for starting your career in cooking. So if you do happen to enjoy this video, then be sure to give it a share, give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe for more content. Now, let's get started. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are wondering, especially for home cooks, on what type of knives should you get, because there are a lot, and I mean a lot of different styles just for Western knives alone. So many styles that I don't even have every type myself, like a cleaver, which there are some specialty knives that do help with certain jobs, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to buy that knife unless you're going to be doing a lot of that work. The most important knife in the kitchen, especially for the professional kitchen, is the chef knife. And these come in multiple different sizes. This is the ultimate utility knife in the kitchen. The most common sizes are 10, 9, and 8 inch, although you can get them in 7 and 6 inches. And I'm sure some brands or some companies do actually make them a bit longer as well. If you have to pick one knife in the kitchen, the chef knife would be the one to pick. Another very common knife to use in the kitchen is the Santoku. Now, this is a more Japanese influenced style knife, and it takes the job of the chef knife. So if you had to pick between the two, this is a little bit smaller on average. The nose is a little more bent as well, but you can still dice onions with this. You can do fine work with this knife. And if you had to pick between the two, it doesn't really matter. Personally, I choose the chef knife over this because I prefer the French style over this. One thing to consider though when buying a chef knife is whether or not you want a bolster with the knife. Is this part that's here. I'll speak a little more about this a little later on because there are benefits to having one. Paring knives. These are the smallest knives in the kitchen, typically the smallest in your kit, and we use these for all the small, fine, detailed work. So you can do a lot of intricate work in garde-manger with these little knives. It is a good idea to pick one of these up. You don't have to get an expensive one, but at least to have one in the house is important. Bread knives. As the name implies, we use these to cut bread. Bread knives are not only great for cutting bread, but they're also great for cutting fruits. If you have to cut a lot of fruit, one of these will come in very handy. Bread knives are serrated knives, and serrated means that they have these little teeth, but these are also single beveled knives. So you can't sharpen these like a normal knife. You have to take these to either a professional, or if you have the special equipment, to be able to resharpen these little grooves. This is a boning knife. Now, these are more specialty knives. You don't have to get one if you don't want to, but these do help if you want to break down a lot of poultry or if you want to break down some meat. Utility knives. These knives are great for slicing. They come in multiple different sizes. Sometimes you see a lot of people using these as chef knives, and for me, I don't like to use them like that because one, you don't have enough clearance for your fingers, so you can't do a lot of chopping. So, fillet knives. Fillet knives are typically quite flexible. These are great if you do fillet a lot of fish. If you don't have one of these, you can use a chef knife to fillet fish, as I have done many times as well. It's not a necessity to get one of these, but it does make a difference. And after all those knives, it is important to have some sort of steel. This is a honing rod. Honing means that you're just fixing the edge of the knife. You're not necessarily sharpening it. You are taking off steel. As you can tell with this little paring knife that I've used extensively, it's not flat anymore. This is from using the honing rod too much. The other type of steel is the diamond steel. Now, this steel will sharpen your knives, but I don't necessarily recommend it if you actually want to take very good care of your knives. This will do the job quickly if you need it sharp just to cut something quickly, but if you want to spend a lot of money on your knives, it's a better idea to get some stones and to sharpen them properly, and then to use either the honing rod when you need to, or to use one of these, a little bit of leather to stroke your knives. And I will speak about that a little more in another video with my Japanese knives. So now that we've discussed a little about the types, if you're a home cook, what type should you get? My recommendation would be 3 basic knives and a steel. The chef knife is one of the most important ones, so this I would say is a must. I would say about an 8-inch chef knife for home use. You don't necessarily need a massive chef knife to be cutting a lot of product at home. I would also recommend getting a bread knife because you can use it for more than just bread. You can also use it for fruit, but it is good to have a serrated knife in the house. And then I would recommend getting a paring knife. You don't have to spend a lot of money on one. I mean, seriously, you can pick a paring knife up for just a couple dollars and have one in the house. And then of course you need something to sharpen knives with. So either getting a steel is a good idea, stones if you want to sharpen your knives properly, or if you want something that's not laborious and basically idiot-proof, you can get a diamond sharpener where you just put the knife in the groove, you pull it back, and your knives are sharp. Now, if you do want to start cooking professionally and you're either going to do your apprenticeship or you're going to go to a culinary college, it is a good idea to have your own set of knives. Although, typically in the US, the company will actually have their own kitchen knives that you use to do your job. So you don't have to spend money on this if that's the route that you want to take. When I started working in London, I literally packed my backpack and I left for London. I didn't take my knives with me. Lo and behold, I needed my knives. So my dad had to send my knives over and I was working a week without them. In many places over here, it's expected that you have your own set of knives with you. That doesn't mean that you need to spend a lot of money on your knives, but it does mean that you need knives to work with to get the job done. When working in a kitchen professionally, you have to have a chef knife with you. You have to have your Perry knife, a serrated knife, a boning knife if possible. You also need a knife bag. As you can tell, this is very old. It's falling to pieces, but it still works. It's also important to have a spatula, a hard spatula and a soft silicone spatula. And then of course it is a good idea to have a few extra little goodies, including a peeler, measuring spoons. This is also a good idea to have in your kit when starting work. If you don't need them, that's great, but more likely you're going to use these once in a while. A little brush, a little calculator if you don't have your phone on you, markers and highlighters. These are very important, especially if you're in banqueting. If you can get a microplane, it comes in very handy. Also, instead of buying one expensive Perry knife, I would rather say to buy several cheaper Perry knives. These cost just a few dollars. Buy a few that are a few different sizes. Get one bird's beak Perry knife. This helps if you need to like peel anything. And at least one serrated Perry knife. If you have some shears, it would be better as well if you have to use them to cut anything. A steel, and then any other knives that may come in the kit. You don't have to buy every single knife to start working, but having these basics will help you a lot. Also, a thermometer is a good thing to have in your kit, especially when working in the US and you have to write the temps down. It's a good thing to have this. Now, when buying knives, doesn't matter whether it's professional or for home use, you don't necessarily have to spend a lot of money just to get the job done. As a matter of fact, I would recommend spending less money if you just need something to use at home than going out and spending hundreds of dollars on knives that you're not going to take care of. It's not worth it, I should say. You also need to decide on whether or not you want carbon knives or stainless. If you're just going to be working at home, and even if you're going to be starting in the kitchen, I would highly recommend getting stainless steel. It's low maintenance and you don't need to worry about it. I'd also recommend getting plastic or polymer handles. Again, very low maintenance, you don't need to worry about them. Wood handles, such as this, you have to oil and take care of because they can crack, and if you're in the kitchen and not taking care of your knives, you'll start to see issues with them a little later on. Carbon steel knives, however, do retain their edge longer because it's harder steel. And I do have a lot of carbon steel knives from my father from Sheffield, England, English knives, and a few Sabatier knives as well, but they're like 60 years old. They're very old. And of course I don't have them with me. They're in the US, but they do hold their edge pretty well. If this is going to be your first job in the kitchen, if you are new to knives, new to cooking, you don't know how to sharpen your knives, how to take care of them, I would not recommend spending all the money and buying Japanese knives. I wouldn't. Japanese knives are typically much more expensive per knife because there's a lot more work that goes into making each one, because a lot of these makers are artisan knives. They make the knives one by one. And the steel is typically a lot harder, a little more brittle than European knives. European knives, the metallurgy is a little softer, and the benefit with a softer steel is that they don't chip as easily. They still can, but not as easily. The only downside is that you have to sharpen them more frequently. I have had a lot of friends at work that are good chefs that take care of their knives. They baby their Japanese knives and they still chip. It's just because it's busy in the kitchen, things happen. Another person grabs your knife and uses it, which happens a lot. And Japanese knives are not good knives to be using when you have to, say, cut through bone or you have to cut hard materials. But again, that discussion is for another video. Now, stamped versus forged knives, I wouldn't worry too much about this. You can see the price difference. If you spend a little more money, Typically the knives are going to be forged, but not always, because today actually some stamp knives are pretty good. But stamp knives are typically cheaper because it is a sheet of metal that they roll out, and either the laser cuts it out or they stamp it out and they make a knife with it. Now there are benefits to having a full bolster. One, it does protect your hand from running up the blade, which is nice to have. As you can tell, these knives don't have bolsters at all, and with this one it's not easy for your hand to run up the blade, but with this one it is, especially if you push. The other benefit of a bolster is that if need be, I can use this to crack bone, crack nuts, open cans. No, because I don't do that with my knives, but you could, if you didn't care about your knives, you could use it for that. The only downside of the bolster is that since it's so much steel and it's so thick, that even with a stone, I can't sharpen this. I have to take this to a professional sharpener. My first recommendation for cheaper knives is Victorinox. This is the Swiss Army knife maker, and they make really good kitchen knives. I picked this bread knife up about 7 years ago for about 30 euros. Prices have gone up with everything, so it may be a little more expensive now, but it is a lot cheaper buying one of these than buying one of these bread knives from WÜSTHOF, which costs about, what, 100 or more now. And if I'm speaking quite frankly, for this specific knife, I prefer this one compared to this one. So it's cheaper, I prefer it. Is a better choice. Mercer is also a good company. The knives are relatively cheaper. I've used them in the past. I don't have any, well, I have one with me right now, but I don't know where it is. Acros is another company that's here in Spain. They make knives, they make spatulas, they make a lot of kitchen equipment. And if you work here, you'll see them. Dexter is another cheap company that makes chef knives. I have quite a few Dexter knives back in the US. I don't have any here with me, but they are another good company. A lot of other companies out there that I haven't listed that have cheaper knives, but Victorinox would probably be my first choice for knives if I wanted to buy something a little cheaper. Now, if you want to spend a little more money, one of the companies that I love, that I've used them for years, is WÜSTHOF. Again, if I mispronounce any German, I apologize. I've been thinking in Spanish and English for quite a while now, and my German's a little rusty. Years ago, though, WÜSTHOF used to have a few cheaper lines of knives. They had an entry level, which was very cheap, and then they had this brand, which I'll put the name of it up, but they don't make this anymore. And this knife kit that I got years ago didn't cost that much money, almost nothing. And now if you can try to find one of these, each of these knives will cost over 100. ZWILLING is also another great company. They don't just make chef knives, and they have multiple brands of chef knives. They actually own Miyabi. They do, I believe, have a cheaper brand of knives that you may want to look into if you're interested. Global is another good company. I don't have any Global knives with me, but I know a lot of people that do have them, and they love them. Me personally, I'm not the biggest fan, only because the handle is metal, and when I grab a Global knife and my hands are wet, it doesn't feel the same way. I honestly, the feel is one of the most important things with me when I hold a knife, if whether or not it feels good in my hand. If it does, I like it. If it doesn't, I don't like it. And this is one thing to take into consideration, especially if you're going to be working with the knife all the time. But if you just need something to cut some veggies and fruit at home, you can spend 10, 15 bucks on it and be happy instead of spending 100. It makes a big difference. If I were you guys, I would set a budget on the maximum amount of money that you want to spend. Write down the knives that you want, and then check out some of the links that I will leave down below on a few different brands, knife makes, a few different sets as well. I would also suggest to go down to your local knife shop and feel the knives in your hand before you buy. Depending on where you shop, the local stores may be a little more expensive, but it's totally free to walk down there and actually pick the knife up and see whether or not it feels good in your hand. That's free. You don't have to buy it. You can find a place either online or another knife shop that may be a little cheaper, but at least it gives you an idea on what the knife is going to feel like when using it. And one thing that is very important, this is from experience, when working in any place, the last thing that you want to do is have a beautiful set of knives, because somebody will steal them. I have seen this happen multiple times in the kitchen, and it's not fun. And trust me, if you have a full set of Miyabi knives and everybody sees this in the kitchen, somebody's going to want it and somebody will try to steal it. So regardless of what knives that you get, I would highly recommend to engrave your knives with your initials, or at least to have some sort of marker that you know that it's your knives. Hopefully I answered some of your questions if you had any on which knives to get, and well, hopefully you learned a thing or two as well. If you have any questions or comments, guys, then don't hesitate to ask, and we will be making more videos on Japanese knives, so don't worry, this is not just going to be a one-time thing. So in any case, have a great day, take care, be sure to give this video a like and a share so more people can see it, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any future content. Until next time, take care.